So, as we moved further into the second and third centuries, as I've said, the weather, climate in this region became warmer. Climate in this region here, and up north of here began to become cooler. Exactly why, we don't know. But certainly, it encouraged people like the Vandals and the Saxons to get in motion. They're looking for food. And they're looking for plunder too. Nothing wrong with plunder, but basically they're looking for a place to live and a place to get crops. Uh, so they're going to put enormous pressure here on this Rhine region, and then over here in the Danube region. It's going to be all the emperors can do to control these folks. Now, at the same time that the emperors, though, are having to get large armies to fight, almost constant warfare here, and also over here, um, the ability of the Roman Empire to provide people has grown less because you have, as I say, first the two big um, disease outbreaks here, but then you have just a whole series of them. I mean, we don't actually know how many there are because you can't really, the documents just don't let you see, that this is one disease and that's another disease. Sometimes they just kind of merge together. There's a lot of disease. Um, so uh, essentially, what we have here is an empire that's under siege. This part of the empire will kind of detach itself. This part of the empire will be conquered, reconquered, conquered back another time. All of this is costing resources. All of this is costing human lives. And whether or not the Roman Empire actually grew in terms of population is a very interesting question for this time period. We don't know. Certainly, the macro parasitism of particularly the Germans, and over this way the Persians, um, and the micro parasitism of the diseases that were coming in basically from the east, and maybe up the Nile, maybe. Um, it was just, you're really asking a lot of any political organism. Um, and the Germans, not the Germans, but the Romans, got themselves into a severe crisis. This is called the crisis of the third century. And the crisis of the third century, basically, um, depending upon how you count them, there were 21 emperors during this crisis, 20 of whom died violently. Um, there may have been 30. It all depends upon how you count them. Emperors or people who called themselves emperors popped up all the time over a 35-year period. In one instance, you have six emperors in 9 years. And there were literally emperors whose days can be counted on three months of the calendar. So now this fellow here is named Aurelian. Aurelian governed for 5 years. He was called the restorer of the Roman Empire. He also was called Hand on Still, which gives you an idea of just what a rough guy he was. But it took a rough guy to handle all these problems. And to Aurelian's credit, he did. He proved that the Roman Empire could be restored, and that the barbarians could be pushed back, and all these other emperors who just declared themselves emperors could be defeated, usually killed. So he did prove it could be worked. But the problem is, of course, is that being emperor, after you have so many killed by assassination, it's no longer as a position of respect, in a manner of speaking. He Aurelian can't keep his hands off other men's wives, and eventually he ends up being stabbed by his secretary, as a matter of fact, who in those days would be male. But still, Aurelian stands out. But the crisis of the third century did not stop with him. Go on. You have a whole series of emperors after him, one right after the other. And so it looked as though the Roman Empire simply couldn't be governed. And then I don't know that Diocletian is the best general Rome ever had. He was certainly an important general. But almost by luck, he becomes emperor. And he may not have been a great general, and he really wasn't a great general, but he was a great administrator. And he saw that, or he believed that the problem was that there was simply no stability within the empire. Again, you have disease, you have invasions, you have the whole thing. And he felt that the only way to control the empire, to essentially, he thought that the Roman Empire, just as being the Roman Empire, was a good thing. And so he instituted a series of reforms which were certainly not soft. Diocletian, my medieval professor used to say that Diocletian was not a nice man. And of course, he instituted dictatorial rule across the empire, and was more or less successful in bringing the empire under control. I'm not saying that people were happy, but if you're not being raided, and if you've got enough food and enough other sustenance in order to keep yourself alive and frankly help ward off disease, you may not be too bad. So the environment, the disease environment of the Roman Empire actually improves on Diocletian. And he's going to govern 20 some years with a minimum amount of trouble, maybe a maximum amount of secret police, but a minimum amount of trouble. His successor, of course, is Constantine. And Constantine, certainly one of the great figures in human history, probably would have had an SAT of 120, not necessarily the brightest of the emperors, not even close. But he had a kind of an intuitive way of governing, and he's going to be the second longest serving emperor in all of Roman history. And he's going to be very successful about it. And you can see here in his eyes that they're extra large and that they're looking upward. He knew mysticism had taken place in Rome, and that new mysticism was essentially, a thought of heavenly reward afterwards. Diocletian and his followers are going to be Christian, with one exception, and there's going to be a great emphasis on the idea of religion, religious experience, and essentially what does religion mean? And we don't have time to go into all of this, but certainly it's a very important part of it. But there's something else. Pagans, and people who believed in the Greek gods and the Roman gods or whatever, fled death. They fled disease. Christians, however, believing in an afterlife, if a fellow Christian was suffering, they would give them water and food and cover them up and give them shelter. If you do just that, that's all you do, you increase their chances of recovery by 50%. And so essentially the rise of Christianity provided another source of stability beyond the reforms that were instituted by Diocletian and by Constantine. The mere Christianization of the Roman Empire, despite what historians have often said about this, actually helped the 4th century of the Roman Empire to be one of its great centuries. The end of the 4th century was maybe not so good, but the 300s really was one of the great periods in Roman history, not because I'm supporting Christianity or anything else, but simply because there's no question that Christianity helped refound Rome as a Christian state. And that worked very well from the point of view of those who lived there. And so we come to an end of this particular period: disease, microparasitism, Macroparasitism almost destroyed Rome. It destroyed Rome because of the immense pressure they put on the institutions of Rome. And then Diocletian, followed by Constantine, so you're talking about over half a century of government by two people. They reestablished Rome, and they provided that people had food, shelter. Did they have freedom? No, they did not have freedom. But people fed well, people warm, people had roofs over their heads, and you didn't have to worry about Germans coming screaming out of or Goths coming screaming out of the woods and sacking your village and killing everybody. So this period goes by. The diseases, though, are not going to. They're going to come back.